Brian Santiago was handed a pretty stiff test in his first days on the job as BYU's new athletic director. The good news is, based on the most recent reports, that crisis has subsided.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer at the KSL Sports Zone and 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident BYU expert and insider. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances today. Go to monarchmoney.com, use the promo code Locked On College, and get 50% off your first year. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about Brian Santiago's first stiff test as BYU AD and as he passed said test. Then we're going to talk BYU and betting lines. Now, the over-under on their win total has been out for a little bit, but one major expert believes that BYU is a, quote, good bet to go over, and we'll talk about why. And we'll finish up today's show talking about Big 12 revenues. They're down for fiscal year 2024. Is that a concern for BYU in the Big 12? We'll also examine that. All right, so without further ado, yes, you're probably wondering, well, what's this big controversy, Jake? What's happened over the weekend? Well, last week, many of you were paying attention to the announcement of Brian Santiago as BYU's new athletic director. I was down there at the press conference. He went and did his media hit with BYU TV, and then came back and did a scrum with local media. I was in said scrum. We used some of the clips on one of our podcasts last week. And in one of those answers, he talked about wanting BYU's coaches to be, quote, locked in, unquote. Well, the coach he pointed directly to was Kevin Young. Now, when he made those comments, my reporter instinct, call it what you want, Will, spidey sense, it went off in my head and said, okay, something's going on here. And I was not the only one who sensed it. A couple other media members who I talked with in the immediate aftermath of that press conference, like, hey, why do you think he made those comments? I'm like, something's going on. Well, reports have since emerged, and I had to our Locked On Cougars Insider group over the weekend that Kevin Young has been engaged by the Phoenix Suns with regards to their head coaching position. Now, he was not the odds-on favorite. He was nowhere near being the finalist for that position because the reports were out of Arizona that there were between 15 and 20 candidates that they had engaged with, whether that was getting cursory interest to start, interviews, whatever you want to term it. There were 15 to 20 candidates out there for the Suns. Well, yesterday, Chris Haynes, who does a really, really fine job covering the NBA as one of the foremost insiders on the league, he and Shams Charania have really inherited the insider role since Adrian Wojnarowski stepped aside. And a report came out yesterday. It was a video that Chris Haynes did that he is calling it the Elite Eight of candidates for the Phoenix Suns job. And among those names is not Kevin Young. So that indicates to me that BYU has obviously retained their head coach, if that report is to be believed. Could it kick back up? Could they have interviewed these 8 candidates, decided that none of them are who they want? Could they re-engage with Kevin Young? Sure, that could happen, but I don't think you put a report out like that if you're Chris Haynes, if you're not very confident in those 8 people, because he's probably hearing from people down in Phoenix about that. What I was told is that the comments from Brian Santiago, and comes from a person who of really reputable sources, I'll just say that, and they told me that his comments were, quote, they were not circumstantial. And so what that means is that he made those comments on purpose. You hear often that coaches, and I use it on this podcast all the time, that coaches talk to their players via the media. Well, the same thing happens in public negotiations with athletic directors, coaches, and the like. They will put things on the record out there in the media to essentially put pressure on certain people. Was a guy like Brian Santiago trying to express to Kevin Young how much he means to BYU? I believe he was. Was Kevin Young intent on holding BYU hostage and trying to make them pay up? No, I don't think he was, but let's just put it this way. When a franchise like Phoenix that has paid coaches as recently as their most recent coach $10 million, Well, that in theory could more than double what Kevin Young is making as BYU basketball head coach. Matt Norlander from CBS Sports said that Kevin Young, when he came to BYU, signed a 7-year, $30 million deal. You do the math, that comes out to a shade over $4 million, between $4.2 and $4.3 million annually. So if you could get $10 million in Phoenix, that more than doubles the money. And let's be honest, money talks. And the amount of money that we're talking about here, it's pretty unfathomable for a lot of us out there. But in the coaching world, when you can double your money, you're going to obviously hear people out on that. I think any of us, no matter what the amount of money is, if they could more than double your annual salary, you're going to hear people out on that to at least see what's going on. Well, I'm sure Kevin Young had that leverage. He and his agent, they turned back to BYU and said, hey, we don't want to necessarily make you guys pay through the nose for this, but here's the situation as it stands. What can you do? And I'm sure there was a negotiation back and forth. And if the reports from Chris Haynes and others are to be believed, Kevin Young apparently is locked in with BYU. And I would imagine at some point in the relatively near future, you'll probably hear that BYU has a reworked deal for Kevin Young. Did they increase his salary to $5, $6, $7 million? TBD. I'm not even going to begin to try and speculate on that because I don't have a number in mind on that. If I do get it, I'll be sure to pass it along. But I would imagine the BYU's had to dip into its boosters once again and say, hey, we've got this on the record that, quote, we won't be outbid. And I know it was about recruits, but also I think it applies to coaches here, especially coach the caliber of Kevin Young. Kevin Young has done some special things in just 1 year on the job at BYU. It's crazy to think that he has just passed the 1 year mark and BYU's already having to fend off people who want to bring him in as their head coach. I think at some point in the not too distant future, Kevin Young likely will be an NBA head coach. I'm just going to be very straight up front about that. I think that he will go back to the NBA at some point. But I think at this juncture, BYU's kept him on board for at least another year, and it's a good thing that they did, because can you imagine him leaving and opening the transfer window for guys like AJ DeBonsa, Xavier Staten, on down the list of all the guys that he's brought in for this year's roster? They'd all be cleared to transfer without any penalty, and that would absolutely decimate the BYU basketball program. So if what I heard is true, and also what the later reports have come out as, because I was talking with our insiders group people on Friday and Saturday about what I had heard about Kevin Young engaging, or at least being engaged by the Phoenix Suns about their job. That means that Brian Santiago and his brain trust at BYU, I'm sure Tom Homo probably had some say in it if they wanted him to be involved in it. I'm sure Shane Reese, etc., Keith Vorkink. They all probably sat down with Kevin Young and hammered out some type of a deal to keep him, as they mentioned, locked in with BYU, and for good reason. Because you want to talk about a crisis? That would have been an absolute crisis to watch Kevin Young leave the BYU basketball program after just 1 year and what he'd already accomplished as compared to what it looked like BYU could accomplish. That would have been a really, really bad deal. And the nice part is it appears all is well in Provo. And next season, it should be a special one for BYU. And hey, let's say they get through it and they do make a run to the Final Four, to the national title game. If they pull off all that, guess what? There's going to be even more people talking NBA and college basketball who are going to be knocking on the door of Kevin Young saying, hey, would you be interested in taking our head coaching position? That just comes with the territory. So this feels like it could be an annual deal. And I think the thing for BYU is just keep doing what you're doing and make sure that you do the best you possibly can to be, quote, not outbid. All right, we'll flip over and talk a little bit about BYU football. And here's the deal. Over under win totals when it comes to betting sites, well, they're to entice a person to bet. Well, obviously, we are sponsored here on this podcast and the network by our friends at FanDuel. Well, why is BYU football a, quote, good bet? Take the over on. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Now, a bunch of us have done this. I've checked my bank account at times and had, where in the crap did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, and everything else it seems like out there, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center, helping you track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. You stop just managing your money and actually start building wealth and keep track of it all along the way. The best part is with Monarch Money, instead of juggling multiple apps, it brings it all in-house into one app. So it makes it as simple and as easy to monitor your money and helps you along the way. So take control of your finances and do it with our friends at Monarch Money. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Once again, get started today at monarchmoney.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're having a fantastic Monday. Please continue to subscribe, rate, and review. We're having a really, really strong first almost 6 months, 5 months of 2025, and looking forward to the upcoming football and basketball seasons, obviously. And now's as good as time as any. If you have not done so already, subscribe, rate, and review the show and help us continue to build this audience. All right. So BYU's over-under win total from our friends over at FanDuel, as well as a bevy of other sports books out there, has been set at, wait for it, 7.5. Wow, that is really, really low as compared to BYU and what they accomplished last year, winning 11 games. Now, remember last year, BYU's over-under win total, 4.5. They surpassed that in the first 5 games of the year and went on to absolutely smoke that, more than double in terms of the overall wins they accomplished last year. Well, here's the deal. BYU is not being downgraded by these sports books out there, including our friends at FanDuel. In fact, the biggest thing is they think that the Big 12 is going to be a dog-eat-dog conference this year because the highest win totals I have seen anywhere are 8.5 wins in the Big 12. They think that the top tier of the Big 12 conference are a bunch of teams who are just going to beat the crap out of each other. And if you go by just the overall win totals, the winning team in the conference could have just 9 wins. Do I believe that's going to happen? No, I do believe that at least one team, and fingers crossed, it's the BYU Cougars, surpass that and make a run at 10, 11, maybe even 12 wins and become the creme de la creme of said league. Well, one national insider believes that BYU is a good bet to take if you're so inclined on this, and that is Bruce Feldman. He did a great piece for The Athletic over the weekend, and he broke down teams he believes are a good bet to take the over on, as well as some who are the under. Here's what he had to say about BYU. He said, BYU 7.5, take the over. The Cougars have an experienced quarterback in Jake Retzlaff, whom they run enough to pick up key first downs. There's good skill talent around him, such as running back L.J. Martin, receivers Chase Robertson, Parker Kingston. Tight end Carson Ryan, who transferred from Utah, should be a terrific addition. They'll also have one of the best linebacker groups in the country, led by Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker. They have 6 games they'll have a clear advantage in: Portland State, Stanford, ECU, Arizona, Cincinnati, and UCF. So right there, he believes you got 6 wins already on the docket. If that over-under is at 7.5, all you do is pick up 2 more wins. He also mentions this. They go to Boulder to face a Colorado team that they smashed in the Alamo Bowl, and a team replacing its starting quarterback, most of its wide receivers, and its Heisman Trophy winner in Travis Hunter. Beyond that, they have home games against West Virginia, TCU, and Utah. They also adds trips to Iowa State and Texas Tech won't be easy. And I completely agree with those last 2. The trips to Iowa State and Texas Tech, those ones, probably the most likely losses on the schedule for BYU. But beyond that, there's 10 games right there for BYU they could pick up very, very easily. And that's why I, alongside a guy like Bruce Feldman, I'm sure a number of you out there as well, believe that taking BYU on the over 7.5, that's an easy call. Now, I am a person who's never really done sports betting in my life. If you like to wager, good on you. It's to everybody, to each their own. And we have a lot of people out there who like to comment, they're first timers coming around the podcast. Why is BYU podcast being sponsored by FanDuel? Well, it's a network-wide initiative. That's the thing I keep reiterating to people. It's not just specific to this show. It goes across the entire Locked On network. But the bigger point is BYU is a good bet to go over 7.5. In fact, if I were so inclined, I would go and put a significant amount of money on BYU right now on that over. Now, don't construe that as me telling you guys to do that. That's not my place to do that. You have to obviously do it of your own volition if you are so inclined. But I believe that BYU, they have got a really strong team. I have got a really, really strong feeling that this BYU team could do some really, really cool stuff this year. Now, that's gut feeling, obviously, but the numbers also indicate the BYU should have a very, very strong team. You bring back a lot of contributors, and obviously when you have your quarterback, running back, you got a nice contingent of wide receivers to get the ball out to. I think people are continuing to underrate a guy like Carson Ryan. You want to get BYU back into the tight end business? Carson Ryan's a very, very good bet to do that. Now, I know his numbers from his career to this point don't indicate that he is going to be a breakout star, but I'm telling you, based on what I heard in spring camp, what I saw with my own eyes, he looks like a difference maker at tight end for BYU, and that could really unlock this BYU offense. Then Jay Hill last year on BYU's defense, what a revelation it was. He got the most out of everybody he had in that unit, and all they have done is really upgrade in many respects. You add guys like a Keanu Tanavasa and a Justin Kirkland who have got bona fide credentials as power 4 contributors, if not downright stars, on the interior of your defensive line. Well, that's going to keep guys like a Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker that much cleaner and allow them to make more plays in the backfield. I like what the safety contingent led by Tanner Wall offers as well on the back end of BYU's defense. And simply put, I believe in Jay Hill to an incredible level. He has proven himself time and time again, even before he got to BYU. He made Weber State a perennial contender at the FCS level. And those defenses he has fielded have just been absolutely ferocious. They just don't give up. And that's what I like about this BYU team is they also have a collective chip on their shoulder. Remember last year, they talked time and time again throughout that 9-0 start that they were continually being underrated. I still will never get over the fact that they went to UCF last year as an undefeated top 15 ranked team and were an underdog to a sub 500 Knights squad. That screamed to me that for whatever reason, the odds makers out there did not know what to do with BYU last year. And the nice part is I think when BYU went and smashed Colorado in that Alamo Bowl, I think it said everything that BYU wanted to say last year to the haters who thought that they were but overrated all season long last year. They show that they were legitimate. They show that they should have probably been more in the mix for the college football playoff, etc. Can they accomplish that this year? We'll have to wait and see. But I think 7.5, it's way, way too low for BYU unless, and I have to add this caveat, unless major injury strikes the BYU Cougars, it feels like they are a very, very solid bet to easily surpass 7.5 wins. And in fact, I would probably have put the line myself if I were an odds maker at 9.5, because I think BYU can get to 10 wins. And really those two, the road game at Iowa State the week after facing Utah at home, that's a really, really tough back-to-back gauntlet. And obviously Texas Tech, if they're all they're cracked up to be and all the additions that Texas Tech has made in the transfer portal are legitimate, that Red Raiders squad, by the time BYU gets there, could be formidable and could be a very, very tough trip going to Lubbock. But the nice part is I think Kalani Sitake's got a good hold on this team. And the nice part is he's got a lot of good leadership in terms of the players on this squad. And they all want to go out there and prove themselves and say, hey, yeah, 11-2 was great last year. Let's see if we can one-up that one more time and see what we can do in the final stanza for a lot of these guys. Guys like Jake Retzloff, Chase Roberts, they're in their final run with BYU. They want to go out on an even higher note than they did last year, and the opportunity exists. So we'll see how it all goes for Kalani Sitake and company in 2025. All right, coming up next, we're going to finish up today's show on the conference level. The revenues across the Power 4 conferences are down as a whole. Now, it's ever so slightly, but should that be of concern for BYU fans? That should be a concern for Brigham Young University in terms of, hey, we have been thinking we're going to get this amount of money. Is it a one-year blip or is it a sign of the times for BYU sports? We'll delve into that as we wrap up this edition of Locked On Cougars next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Post District. They are home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings, The Register, Post House North, Post House South, and 801 Flats. Each one of these residences offers its own unique take on luxury urban living. They got features like waterfall kitchen islands, floor-to-ceiling windows, vaulted ceilings, spacious patios, and walk-in closets. You can enjoy premium amenities in the community itself, including the city's largest residential gym, a year-round pool, golf simulator, a massive TV wall for sports watch parties, and more, all anchored by a one-of-a-kind community all around you guys. The best part is you step outside, find yourself immersed in Salt Lake's hottest dining and nightlife scene right there for you guys. Award-winning spots like Urban Hill, Mencho Ramen, Level Crossing, and Sunday's Best just steps away if that's what you're into as well. Whether you're looking for a studio, a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom apartment, or even a penthouse, find your perfect home today with our friends over at Post District. Visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. Mention this ad in Locked On Cougars for an exclusive incentive you won't get anywhere else. Once again, visit liveatpost.com or call them today at 801-590-6247. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? Sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside intel I am hearing on all things BYU. It's all sourced. It's all vetted. And if you guys want it comes to your phone in the form of a text message, and you can fire back with thoughts of your own. And always appreciate your guys' support. And if you want to join today, it's just $5 a month to be a part of the Insiders Group. And the kicker is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks to see if it's the right option for you guys. So if you're so interested, click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching and or listening to this, or reach out to us via social media or email, and we'll get you squared away with the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, so before we go on today's show, the report came out in USA Today over the weekend that tax records indicate that revenues across all of the power conferences, we're talking SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC, as well as the Pac-12, even though it's going to be going under a little bit of a rebrand here, all of them were down for the fiscal year 2024. How concerning should that be for Cougar fans? I think the bigger point is, as they point out in this article, that it appears to be more of a one-year blip. The other thing is, I've seen some people out there with regards to the ACC who have been very intent on trying to hold this over on the Big 12, saying, see, the ACC is not in as bad a spot as some people would have. They're ahead of the Big 12. Okay, here's the deal. The Big 12 signed a deal when they signed it to get themselves into the mix, because remember, it was very clearly stated that the offer to the Big 12 and the Pac-12 was the same deal in essence. And the first person to take it was the person that was the conference that was going to get it. The other one was going to be left out in the cold. That would have been the death knell for the Big 12 had Brett Yormark not pounced on the opportunity with the Big 12. The nice part was it was a relatively short-term deal, 6 years, in fact. And BYU this past year in the fiscal year 2024 made about $20 million. This coming year, they will finally be what they're calling a full share member of the Big 12 conference, and they will finally get the full allotment of the money that is being allotted to them. So last year, the per-school payouts for the Big 12 ranged from $37.8 million to $42.1 million for schools other than the newcomers in BYU, Houston, Central Florida, and Cincinnati, who average about $20 million a piece. The larger payouts were fourth among the Power Five, only surpassing that of the Pac-12. And obviously the Pac-12, it all but died. Now it's going to go under a bit of a rebrand, add new schools, and it's going to be a part of the G5 or G6 going forward. But the nice part is, as it mentions here from Steve Berkowitz, the conference total revenue declined by about $17 million from the fiscal year 2023, and the conference reported nearly $37 million annual operating deficit. But that is because, as I mentioned, the revenue in 4 areas covered by tax records increased. Its bowl revenue dropped from just over $157 million to $110.6 million. There you go. That is nearly $37 million on the dot, and that explains why BYU and the Big 12 were at an operating deficit. The nice part is it appears that these numbers are all going to increase next year, and obviously the pro rata agreement and the kick-in of the full media rights still here for the Big 12 should mean that the Big 12 is in for a better year in fiscal year 2025, and that should encourage you as Cougar fans. The ACC, for everything that has been talked about, is that the ACC number stayed essentially static from year to year, fiscal year-wise. That's not good for that league. Because remember, that league has had all kinds of issues. Remember, they had to rework their deal now where TV ratings, among other factors, are going to pay some schools more than other schools. That's not a healthy thing for a league to have schools who are going to make more than others because of TV ratings and the like. Because simply put, a program like Wake Forest is never going to get the eyeballs that Clemson is going to get. Guess who's going to get more money? Clemson. Guess who's going to be a little bit spurned by that? Wake Forest. I like the fact that the Big 12, yes, they may have taken a hit in fiscal year 2024, but they're going to rebound in a big way, it appears, in 2025. And was it 2035 is when the ACC deal comes up for renegotiation. Well, the Big 12 will go back to market in 2030 and should have a second deal in theory that should surpass what the ACC is paying out and should have another half-decade head start in terms of renegotiating. Maybe potentially when the ACC comes back up again, the Big 12 could be back in negotiations a second time. I know this is probably flying over some of y'all's head, and I get it, but here's the deal. The Big 12 was in fourth place this past year in revenues. The thing is, the ACC maybe made more last year, but when their revenue stayed static, that means if they continue to stay static, they're going to be stuck at the same number for years to come. And the Big 12 deal, it only increases in revenue over time. Now, with the added impact of the House settlement and the $20+ million revenue share that comes into effect, you're talking about ACC schools having to carve into their already massive budgets that a lot of them are operating in the red or at a deficit. They have to carve out another $20 million. They're going to immediately go turn back to the conference and say, hey, we need more money. And the conference is going to say, we don't have any more. I actually like the way that the Big 12 has structured this thing. I think that what Brett Yormark did, he had a bold vision for this league. He said, hey, you know what? We're going to sign a shorter term deal that maybe doesn't pay out as much money right now, but we're going to prove our worth in the meantime. And when we go back to market at the end of the decade, we're going to make up money then. Will it ever approach what the SEC and the Big Ten are making? Probably not, because those two are the darlings of the two major networks. Speaking of ESPN, if you're the SEC, and Fox Sports, if you're the Big Ten, and they're going to be the favored children in terms of the amount of money they're being paid out by those networks. But there's no reason to think that the Big 12, it can't continue to be that third and the premier third conference among the Power Four teams. The ACC should be quaking in its boots, and it feels like they're sitting there wondering, okay, how's this really going to go? Well, I think that they got a short-term solution by agreeing to a new deal that is going to pay out those bigger schools with more revenue, but it's only going to last for so long. We're going to continue to hear about the likes of Clemson, Florida State, Miami, all wanting to jump potentially to the SEC or to the Big Ten, or heck, maybe even some of them do venture a query out there to the Big 12 about potentially rejoining the Big 12. If the Big 12 can make as much money as I believe it can make in time, that's a good sign, because that means that there is stable footing for the Big 12 conference. And as members of the Big 12 and in good standing, speaking of BYU, should be feeling pretty good about themselves. I love the way that BYU operates. It's one of the upstanding athletic departments in terms of it has to operate off of the revenue that it makes. It's never going to be able to operate at a loss like other schools are. The University of Utah had a $17 million deficit last year because of the cratering media rights that the Pac-12 paid out. They have to dig themselves out of that hole. And the sad part is, us as taxpayers in the state of Utah, we're probably going to have to foot part of that with regards to the amount of money that we're putting in to Utah athletics. That's not the way that BYU operates. BYU always operates in the black. They don't spend more than they make. And that is going to make BYU in eras to come, because at some point that balloon is going to pop, and the thought that more money is just going to keep flowing into the coffers, at some point it's not going to happen. And there are going to be a bunch of athletic departments out there that are going to be in dire straits, cutting athletic programs, trying to cut all kinds of different things just to keep themselves afloat. So long as BYU adheres to the principles it's always adhered to, and that is living within its means, they're going to be in a great spot. And the Big 12 also appears it's in a pretty solid spot as well to keep that revenue flowing towards Brigham Young University and its member schools. Even if they were in fourth place this year, I think that they'll be in third place for the foreseeable future. In the ACC, it can eat its heart out, because it feels like at some point the ACC is going to implode upon itself. And that's going to be a very interesting time, whether it's in 3 years, 4 years, or 10 years from now. Something is going to happen. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the podcast. As always, thank you for y'all's support. I really appreciate you guys being with us, and continue to subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Let us know how we also can improve. We're always open to open feedback. If you want to just take pot shots at me, that's not what it's here for. I like constructive criticism. Let's just put it that way. So as always, thank you for all of your support of the podcast. Please, once again, make sure you join us every single day and become what we like to call an everydayer. And once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day.